Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right, so I have, I'm looking at the computer because I have a PowerPoint to show. Oh, hello. Okay, can you hear me now? Because I have a PowerPoint and I have a video as well. Hello, Thomas. Thomas is in this video, so he's gonna get to show us all his media self. So before we start the video, just I want to say, give you my greetings from Governor Cuomo. As Alfonso just said, I am the Executive Director of the Council on Community Reentry and Reintegration. We can just call it the Reentry Council for short, that the governor created in the summer of 2014. And the goal of the council was to identify and alleviate barriers affecting people with criminal convictions. So that's certainly people coming home from prison, the formerly incarcerated, as well as people who have been in the community who have criminal convictions, and people who might not have been incarcerated but who have had criminal convictions. So I'll start by showing a brief video that explains what the council is in a jazzy video-like way, and then I will talk about the 12 accomplishments that the council has done in its first year, and also talk a little bit about what I do when I'm not in the governor's office.
In 2014, Governor Cuomo created the Council on Community Reentry and Reintegration, building upon his 2012 Work for Success initiative. The council was tasked with identifying and alleviating the barriers that people with criminal convictions face every day in New York State, including issues with employment, housing, health, licensing, and more.
It's hard to try to live or to feel like you're a person when everybody's saying no.
Each year, about 25,000 people go into state prison, and at the same time, each year, about 25,000 come out of state prison, returning typically to the communities where they live.
Our clients who want to re-enter society and improve their lives, and that applies to the vast majority of them, have been unable to do so because of the institutional barriers that they face.
They told me that most likely I'd be good, everything would be fine, and I had a start date. And then they called me and said that they couldn't give me the position because of my felony conviction.
If those barriers aren't broken, it becomes a vicious cycle. And that vicious cycle is a cost to all of us.
The council has already made several changes, including streamlining access to identification, individualized assessments for state-subsidized affordable housing, and fair chance hiring for state agencies.
Thank you, Governor Cuomo, for helping make the transition easier by helping us get IDs to start a new chapter in our life.
It's hard to be stable if your housing situation is unstable.
I am ecstatic about the possibility of New York State implementing individualized assessments for New York State subsidized housing, because that would mean I'm being assessed based upon who I am as an individual.
I'm ready for a fair shot on job applications with New York State.
Even though if it's your passion, your love, or something you're naturally good at, you have this chain that tells you you can't do something, and now we have someone like the governor telling us that we can't.
The governor created this council because he believes that all New Yorkers deserve an opportunity to succeed. We will keep removing barriers to create a New York that is more fair and safer for everyone.
Kudos to the governor for creating the Reentry Council.
His vision, his ability to develop partnership from all parts of state and local government as well as communities is essential.
I'm a good person, and I know that I should be here, making a difference.
I think that this program that you have should be a pilot for every state.
Okay, so now let's go to the PowerPoint. So just a couple of sentences about what the council is and who's on the council. The council is made up of people who have worked in the field of reentry for years, many of whom lead organizations. Chris Wattler, for example, who you'll see later, is a member of the council. We have representation from people in New York City as well as upstate New York. And there are some members from government on the council as well. So the council has been meeting for a year, has looked at issues, presented recommendations to the governor, and the governor has accepted the recommendations in these 12 categories that I'll go over. So what you're seeing is a done deal. These things are happening. The role of council staff such as myself are to really work within government to make sure that these things happen and to develop further ideas within government. So let's talk about what we've managed to accomplish in this first year. And the first is really groundbreaking. We have established anti-discrimination guidelines for housing that New York State funds. So what does that mean? I mean, as many of you might know, there is a law in New York State that says if you're applying for employment that there is anti-discrimination protections, meaning an employer is not supposed to just turn you away because of your record. I say supposed, I understand that it does happen, but there are protections under New York State law for that. There are no protections in New York State law for housing. So what we've done is when the government is funding housing, for example, giving tax credit for affordable housing or for public housing that New York State runs, which is a small number. It is not the New York City Public Housing Authority, which is funded mainly by federal dollars, but there are some New York State projects, as well as when New York State agencies give out Section 8 vouchers, which are rental assistance vouchers. In these instances, there are protections now for people with criminal convictions. And there is an individualized assessment that must be done of the person using these different factors, how serious the offense is, how much time has gone by, and what the person has done with their lives since being convicted. So the next slide. As you may know, if you're applying to become a security guard or an x-ray technician or a EMS technician, you have to get licensed for these occupations. And many of these occupations have had just wildly different criteria for how to treat people with criminal convictions. Some people have very difficult times getting these licenses. So what we've done is we've put in a standardized approach for getting licenses if you have a criminal conviction. And the presumption, oh sorry, I'm talking about the wrong one. I'll finish my license and we'll go back to this. The presumption is now that if you will get a license if you have a record. And really the burden is on the state to show why you shouldn't get a license as opposed to the other way around. Fair chance hiring. You may have heard 2 days ago that President Obama announced that he was banning the box for federal agency employment. Governor Cuomo beat him by a few months, so we banned the box for New York State employment earlier this summer. And so when you apply for New York State employment, unless it's law enforcement, you will no longer see the question about a criminal conviction. That question comes up much later when an agency is thinking of hiring you and is giving you a conditional offer, and then they can look at the conviction and see if it's relevant to that particular job. Okay, next slide. This is somewhat technical, but there were some regulations that, in addition to what I said about kind of being hard for people to get licenses, just weren't actually following the law. So we have amended those so that they do that, and they're in the Departments of State, Department of Health, and the Department of Environmental Conservation. Next slide. So supportive housing is a very important strategy for people with extra challenges when they come home from prison or who are in the community, people who need support on the ground as they're living in different communities. And so New York State and New York City have funded supportive housing for a variety of years, but formerly incarcerated people were never sort of called out as a population that a supportive housing operator could build for and get state money. So in the latest round of funding that will go out for supportive housing, formerly incarcerated people have been specifically named as a population that if you as an operator of that want to build a complex for that and can apply for the state money, you can do that. So there are documents called certificates of of good conduct and certificates of relief from disabilities, a mouthful. But these certificates essentially, once you earn them, take away these barriers, for example, in occupational licensing and other areas. They essentially say that conviction no longer applies when you're looking to be licensed. And you can earn these certificates by just being, living in the community without being rearrested. essentially. But the way of getting those certificates was really quite laborious, as we heard. Asking for years and years of tax returns and a fairly burdensome process. And we have looked at that process and we streamlined it, asked for a lot less documentation, much more easy to read the application. So our hope is now that we'll get a lot more applications for these important certificates. ID. Everybody needs ID, right? You walk into a building, you have to show your ID. But ID can be quite difficult for people who might not have, their Con Ed bill or a lot of different points that you need to go to the DMV license and just apply for a license. So there's now an agreement between the state DMV and docs in which you can leave docs with your Social Security card, your birth certificate, which docs should help you get. I say should, and they're getting better at that. And go to a DMV office within 4 months of release and get a DMV issued ID, including a driver's license or a learner's permit if you're eligible. And that's a shift. It used not to apply to driver's licenses. In different parole offices now, as well as in Department of Labor offices, there is this new technology. It's a kiosk that enables job seekers to connect directly to employers. There might be an ad for a job, and a job seeker can create a video right there on the spot with this kiosk, so that you can reach an employer, sell yourself to an employer without the employer looking at a piece of paper and necessarily seeing you have a record. I know that's less of an issue in New York City now that New York City banned the box for private employers. The bill was signed a few months ago, but New York State has a patchwork of different laws. Some cities ban the box. There is not yet a statewide banning of the box for private employers. So many employers are still able to ask about convictions, and this technology allows someone to make a direct pitch to an employer via video so the employer will be like, I like that person, and then can start to ask or not ask about convictions. This is, for people who've been incarcerated, this one, when family members send in money to you when you're incarcerated, previous DOC's policy, if you owed any kind of fines, or aside from restitution, DOCs could take 100% of the money that your family sent you and apply it to those fines. So that might be that you weren't able to hold on to the money that your family sent you for use inside the facility, or to save really for when you get home. DOCS has now changed this policy so that 50% of that money that comes in from outside sources, including your families, will stay with the person who's incarcerated, so they can save for release or use it for their own purposes. There's a need for much more housing, generally throughout New York State and New York City, but particularly for people with mental illness who aren't really appropriate to be in a housing shelter, need really supported care. So the state has put out some more money for this kind of housing. It put out a request for proposals for operating this housing this summer, and that's really, I think, a sign that this administration understands that there is a lack of housing for this population, understands, particularly for people with mental health issues, how important supportive housing is. There is a real need for people to have continuous health care coverage from the time that they are incarcerated to when they get out. And the council heard a lot about interrupted health care coverage, people not having health care coverage, and everything that can happen as a result of that. And so the correction system has put into place much greater efforts to enroll people in Medicaid while they're still incarcerated. People can be enrolled in Medicaid while they're incarcerated. That's if there might have been some misconceptions that you couldn't. You certainly can, and there have been increased attempts to make sure that people are enrolled in Medicaid while they're incarcerated, both on the state level, and different things are happening in different county levels. I know Rikers Island has been doing this work, in fits and starts for years, and New York State has really upped the number of people that it is enrolling in Medicaid under this initiative. And finally, I think this is the last one, there used to be a policy whereby if someone had a domestic violence charge in their past, they then have a new relationship, perhaps they even get married while they're incarcerated, and the fact that they had that charge in their past meant that they might not be able to live with their new spouse when they got out because that person was considered a similar victim to the person that they had that charge with in the past. DOCS has changed its policy now. It's, they're taking a very individualized approach to whom someone lives with when they get home, so that the hope is for spouses or partners to be able to live together after release, which is what we all want. We want to be able to live with their family members. So I think that those are the 12 accomplishments of this last year, and our work is not done by any means. This year we are looking at a number of other policies, and for the first time, we might consider looking at legislation as well. As you might know, it is not easy to pass legislation in New York State. We all have our dysfunctional legislative systems, and ours is a tough one, but we certainly are interested in ideas that you might have for things that can only be accomplished through legislation. Things that the governor can do on his own, we will continue to do and in this coming year. So certainly want to hear ideas from you as I will be around for a little bit longer this morning. And then I want to end by sort of bringing it back to the theme for today, which is about faith and reentry. So I've been doing this work in prisoner reentry my entire professional career. I am a lawyer. I started off in the Legal Aid Society at the Prisoners' Rights Project, doing class action lawsuits about Rikers Island. Then I moved over to really, I liked what you said about being a doer. I consider myself a doer. I don't like to just write reports about things or, I want to get in there and change things. And I'm looking around the room, I think that's what all of you are doing as you do this work. So I've worked in my professional life in this area, but it's been very great in the last year that my personal life and my faith life has been able to pull together with the work that I've done professionally. I am a member of the First Presbyterian Church of Brooklyn, have been for 25 years. I'm an elder in that church, and right now I'm clerk of session. And just about a year ago, we really upped our efforts with our sister congregation, which is the Church of the Gethsemane, which is a church made up of mostly formerly incarcerated people. We've had, we certainly, had some financial support, and we visited now and then, but that sort of heart-to-heart, really a sister relationship with the congregation began just over a year ago. And I think it's a great example as congregations think about, well, what can they do to be more involved? I would say what we've done is we've actually created a bond with another congregation. And it's a bond in which we both learn from each other. At First Presbyterian, we learn from the people at Gethsemane as they share with us their triumphs and their struggles. And I think, they benefit from us as well. We cook lunches there about every quarter or so, and we do letter writing and visit on and I'm looking at the people who are doing all the work right now, and I'd like them to stand actually. So we have Jane and Dave Elke from First Presbyterian Church. We have and then we have Reverend Diane Lacey, who is the minister at Gethsemane. So, as you're thinking about, ways in which your congregation can do this work, talk to them, because they're the experts who are doing it every Sunday, and they're great people of faith.
And so are you.
And do we have time for questions, or refer to the moderator?
Let's see if there's like just one or two.
Okay.
And then
or else we have a chance to address them later.
Okay, great. Yes, sir.
You go to the mic.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Could you say your name?
Richard Bonomo from Church to Heavenly Rest. I applaud the council's success on streamlining the process to get ID after release. Is there any hope or effort to begin the ID process before release?
Great question. It is being done in a few states. It is extremely expensive to essentially bring in the verification of identification processes, which involve looking at original documents, et cetera, into the prison's facility. It's being done in Texas, it's being done in Virginia. We've examined those systems, and they cost millions of dollars. So in this particular fiscal environment, the answer is no. I will say, though, that under the system that we're doing now, we monitor very carefully how many people have ID. Right now, it's about 45% have state-issued ID within 4 months of release. We would like that number to be higher. So if it just kind of stays there and doesn't move, then I think we could say, well, what can we do to make it higher? And then I think other ideas would go back on the table. But until now, no one was really even looking. Now we're looking. And it moved from 35% to 45% just in the last few months since we really pushed this new process. If it doesn't keep going up, then I think it's time to re-examine.
The 60% they didn't try or they were rejected?
Don't know. It's just a data match between people who came out and DMV. We don't know why they don't have it.
Thank you.
Michael Connolly from the Harlem Family Institute. Could you give us a sense of the top 3 or 4 items that you have on your wish list, things that you'd like to accomplish?
I appreciate that. I have to be a little careful because there's my own wish list, and I am speaking for the governor. I think that something that is very big this year that the governor just announced a couple of weeks ago is clemency. So the governor issued a clemency a couple of weeks ago. He did the first 2 commutations of sentences, meaning releasing people who are currently incarcerated, and then 2 pardons. He'd done some pardons earlier. The governor has set up a process now whereby people who are applying for clemency can get pro bono legal assistance, which I think is critical. People, don't necessarily how to create an effective petition, and the best petitions tend to be ones that are supported by a lot of outside group and legal counsel. So this new pro bono representation for people applying for clemency is just getting rolled out. That's what I'm going to do when I go back. I'm going to continue to work on those training materials for the lawyers. But the governor would like to see lots of good applications for clemency. And I would say if for people who know people who are incarcerated, who have, who are interested in clemency, I think looking at this new process, going to the website, and then encouraging people to sign up for help from pro bono lawyers so that they can present a good petition, that is a priority for the governor. I think that the raise the age legislation that the governor introduced last year, that unfortunately was not passed, that will be back on the agenda this year. And I can just say that there are a number of criminal justice reforms that are being considered, things that are really pretty exciting. So we'll see if they get to the state of the state, which is announced in January. But the confluence between reentry and law enforcement, and the fact that you have people from both sides of the political aisle talking about reentry, the fact that you have police chiefs talking about it, it's a very special political moment. And I think we are fortunate to be in such a time that I think we might be seeing we have seen some big changes. The President's announcement of 2 days ago were big changes. I think that more changes are coming.
Thank you.